So it's been a news heavy week. Everyone in the country, I think everybody listening to this show right now has been watching what's happening in Los Angeles, California, but it's not only happening in Los Angeles, California. Talk a bit about how you're feeling seeing Donald Trump and his administration deploy the National Guard and the Marines to a city that is peacefully assembling.
Nobody asked for this. Donald Trump said he was going to focus on deporting violent criminals. And to date, he has deported an American citizen, 4-year-old battling cancer. He's broken up a lot of families of people who committed no violent crimes. In my community, we're reeling from a gentleman named Miguel Lopez who worked at a local winery, had a family, and committed no violent crime and was just removed last week to Mexico. This is not what people asked for. They were told the worst were going to be sent away, and instead, too many innocent people are being sent away. Over this past weekend, ICE detained a U.S. Marshal. I mean, that's crazy. Like a sworn law enforcement officer, citizen. I mean, that's how far afield they have gone in what the mission is supposed to be. So I get why people are pissed off and why they're going to the streets. And to me, whether it's in that square mile of Los Angeles or other cities across the country, the most important part is that it's the size that is the point. The point is the size. It's not any acts of violence. It's showing that everywhere we are linking arms and we are saying, this is not who we are. And by the way, I also just want to say I have heard enough in the last couple weeks about ICE agents and wearing masks that I think when we win the majority in the House, you're going to see enough Democrats make it a priority for ICE enforcement that they are no longer faceless. It looks too much like some 1800s bank robber or some KGB officer in Russia, pulling protesters off the streets, and that part it really bothers people that that's how they're conducting it. And so, show us your face is going to be a part of, I think, a democratic enforcement policy in the future.
As you mentioned, the Trump administration said before the election that they were going to go after the worst of the worst. And they held signs at their convention that said mass deportation now. And I think when you put those two things together, there was an obvious, you could predict that they were going to eventually have to round up people who aren't the worst of the worst. Why do you think it is so difficult for there to be a message that breaks through that they're picking up fathers like the one you were just talking about? They're picking up parents and separating families and really strike a chord with people's moral compass.
Right, because as I said, it's not who we are, and it's not what anybody asked for. And to me, the message is that we have a workforce crisis in America. As a parent, I know that we have a childcare provider shortage in America. As somebody who has a district with 70 wineries in it, we have an agriculture worker crisis in America. Food and beverage establishments, restaurants have a shortage of labor. Hospitality has a shortage of labor. And so we are paying more in how we have our kids taken care of and what we eat when we go out to dinner and what we spend when we go on vacation because of a workforce crisis. And so I think we have to pivot from, yes, we can surge resources at the border. Everyone agrees on that. But there is a workforce crisis, and you're only going to make us spend more in our daily lives, and you're going to break up people who are a part of our communities while doing it.
Do you think what's happening right now is a step towards authoritarianism? That is the quote from Governor Gavin Newsom of your home state.
Yes, Donald Trump is an aspiring dictator. He has not achieved it yet. He's aspiring. And so I see it as, to prevent that from happening, democracy is a table that sits on four legs. It's a check by Congress against abuses of power, it's a free press, it's independent courts, and it's a town square that's full of people. The check by Congress is gone. So it's essentially sitting on top of three legs, which is okay. Three legs can hold the table of democracy for now. We can't lose another leg. And so that's why it's so important that the press fiercely cover the this president, that the courts continue to independently rule on these cases. And he's lost over 100 cases that have been sand in the gears against his illegal executive orders, and that the town squares continue to be full. And so whether it's these demonstrations, as I said, in Los Angeles, or the No King's Day demonstration that's going to take place in 2,000 different cities across America this weekend, that can keep him from achieving dictatorship.
What would it take for one of the other legs to fall?
Yeah, I really believe that the town square is the most important one,
Mm,
because if he refuses to follow a court order and the press reports on that, but no one shows up and no one cares, then he's just going to continue to not
mm,
follow court orders. And then I think he will continue to try and pick off and suppress the press, whether it's taking away their credentials or whether it's trying to do, these drug deals with some of the big corporations, to have them pay him because he didn't like the way they were covered, or to tell ABC News that they have to fire Terry Moran. And so it really, I think what stops him is the town square being full. So as long as your listeners still care and still show up, that still matters in America.
Is there anything that's happened in the last 4 months that has surprised you?
The execution that he has been able to show, he was very incompetent in his first term. He was corrupt, but we were saved by his childishness and incompetence. And he learned from that. And
Mm,
anyone who aspires to be a dictator would learn from that. And that was always going to be the risk. And so now he has a North Korean like cabinet who will not speak truth to power. And they had been planning for 4 years through Project 2025 and other blueprints that they had as to how they would carry this out. For example, even with the deployment of federal troops into the square mile of demonstrations in Los Angeles, we're now learning that this had been planned for months. And so
mhm.
they are much more capable at carrying out their authoritative uh, plans than they were in the first term. And that is quite alarming. And it also has to bring a level of urgency for all of us.
Obviously, the Republicans have the majority in the Congress right now, both in the House and in the Senate. But if they didn't, what could the Congress do in terms of oversight to rein in some of these authoritarian moves by this administration?
So that's the fourth leg that we're going to put back in place
Mm,
next November. So yes, oversight, of course, means subpoenas that courts, one of the other legs, would have to enforce, to have the Department of Justice come to Congress and tell us whether Donald Trump is actually suppressing the Epstein files because he's complicit in it, as Elon
mm,
Musk alleged. To understand what happened with our data when Doge uploaded it, to understand the chain of command in these, lawless orders to use our military, so that they would have to answer for that in front of the American people. Also, it's the power of the purse to
mhm.
really constrain the president from spending $134 million, which is the price tag for this political
Right.
stunt to use our troops in Los Angeles. And by the way, we've seen now pictures from the San Francisco Chronicle and the LA Times. They're sleeping in squalor. It's not like they're in Afghanistan or Iraq. They're in a major US city that's going to host the World Cup and the Olympics, and they're sleeping in squalor, which is exactly how you would expect a commander in chief to treat people who he has called suckers and losers. So we can shine a light on all of that, and we can constrain it financially when we're in the majority.
I want to talk a bit about what's happening in the Senate now. The Senate is negotiating and talking through the provisions in the Republican spending bill that passed already through the House of Representatives. Talk a bit about the impact of what's in the bill on your district.
15 million Americans are going to lose their health care. And so many people in my district, and we have a lot of local community healthcare centers. One of them is called Access, the other is called Tiburcio Vasquez. They will suffer in their ability to provide for the people who need healthcare the most in my community. There's a district in the Central Valley represented by a Republican, David Valadeo, where 60% of his constituents are under Medicaid. And so it's really important, as this comes back to the House, that we put pressure on Republicans who have a majority of their constituents affected by this, because they will be the ones who have their health care taken away. But also, when we think about our kids and the future of our economy,
Mm.
AI is ubiquitous. It is a part of every business plan today, small, medium, and large. And the future of work is going to be defined by whether you know how to use AI or whether you don't. And what's alarming about the Republican bill, which was supposed to be, just tax cuts for the richest in America by taking it away from the poorest, was they threw in there a 10-year moratorium on any AI regulation, which is nuts. I mean, there's nothing that has ever been a part of civilization that will change it more and accelerate technology more than AI. And they want to give it a 10-year sandbox, so to speak, without any regulation. I embrace AI. I think it's going to change the workforce, but we have real concerns around copyright, trademark, data, privacy, kill switch. Like, how do you turn it off if it goes rogue? And to have no restriction on that at all it's going to be quite dangerous for our kids, for our national security, and for the future of work. But they don't care, because this is what the billionaires who sat in the front row of the inauguration asked for. And so we have to keep elevating what the stakes are before the vote comes back to the House.
Depending on what happens, I think we're going to circle back to what you just said
Yes.
about AI regulation very soon. Let's talk about Father's Day. I know that you have 3 kids. That's
I have
right.
3. Yes.
3 kids. Okay, so ahead of Father's Day, and you talked a bit about thinking about kids in this moment and the next generation. I mean, what does it mean to you to be a dad and also a representative in a moment where we're facing myriad crises?
So my kids are 8, 6, and 3. And the oldest is just starting to understand the stakes of what's happening around him. And I frankly, I hate that, not just because it means he's getting older, but to hear him talk about this administration and what he thinks it means to him, it's just crushing, because I don't want a child, to worry about that. And that was always the pressure I'd put on myself during the last election, was that if we won, most kids would never know or have a memory of Donald Trump. It would just be what they read in the history books. But now a whole generation is going to have to, suffer through this and be traumatized by what he does to our country. But that's also a motivator to make sure that it ends in 2028, and that it's not a third Trump term or a Trump family rule of our country. I'm also, just because I'm around 3 little kids, I'm contractually optimistic on
Hmm.
their behalf. But I'm also realistic. And I'm realistically optimistic because I do find inspiration in the amount of Americans who are standing up and saying, this is not happening on our watch. But the truth is, on Sunday, I will, spend the day, with my kids, treasured time together. And I know the oldest, who, just like in any family, is always the one who gets the most attention, because they're the neediest, and they have learned how to work their parents. He's just going to want to play baseball all day. He's obsessed with baseball. We had the congressional baseball game for charity
Hmm.
this week at the Capitol. He was a bat boy. I played in the game. He was a bat boy. I think he looked much better on the field than I did. And then I will call my own father, who I just want to tell
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
is where I find my inspiration. He was a police officer.
Mm.
He was a police chief of a small town, and there was a good old boys network in this town in Iowa that he stood up to, and they wanted to corrupt him. And when he refused to be corrupted, and actually went after the mayor and city council, they called him to the carpet and told him that he would have to reverse his case against them, or they'd fire him. And he could have kept his job. It was a job he loved and he worked hard to earn. But he said, fire me, because I'm not going to be corrupted
Mm.
that way. And that's how we went from Iowa out west. And so that was my earliest memory. So I think about that this Father's Day, my own father, who was willing to lose his job to do what's right. And that inspires me and also frustrates me, because I serve with a lot of people who I think are not willing to lose their job,
Mm.
do what's right. They look the other way because keeping their job is more important. But I wish all of your listeners, all of the fathers there, a happy Father's Day, and hopefully it's a break from just the madness that our country has been going through.
It's a powerful story and message. Congressman Eric Swalwell, representative of California's 14th district. Thank you so much for
Of
being
course.
with us. Happy Father's
Thanks
Day
for
to
that.
you. Thank you
Thank
again.
you.